My special guest today is Wander Rutgers. Wander is the Chief Operating Officer of LightYear, where he's focused on building out the brokerage, compliance, and business functions to support growth and expansion. Before LightYear, Wander was president of RobinHood UK, leading the business in its international expansion efforts. Before that, he was the product leader at Plum, where he spearheaded the launch of its mutual fund investing product. Wander also held various roles at Wise, now called TransferWise, across operations and product, including helping the company expand into dozens of new markets. Welcome to the show, Wander.
Thank you, Andrew. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, you've got an awesome background. Can you tell our audience just a little bit about yourself and your experience in the fintech industry and how you came to be at LightYear?
Yeah, thank you. So I'm a Dutchman living in London. I spent about 10 years now in the fintech industry based in London and 1 year in Nairobi. So my background is I was a strategy consultant. I didn't really enjoy that very much. So instead of doing an MBA, I moved to Kenya and started working for this payments app, which was building mobile payments in Kenya. And what I realized is it was very, very cool that with a very small team, you can build these products that affect hundreds of thousands of people if you're in fintech, right? You can have a huge amount of leverage with a small team. From Kenya, I moved to London. I joined Wise. And Wise is a money transfer firm. I helped them grow internationally and built kind of the nuts and bolts of the payments product. And I met Michael and Martin, who are the co-founders of LightYear. And I worked with them to make Wise a more international product. After I left Wise, I went into the problem of wealth. And I realized for myself, I quit my job to figure out what to do next. And I realized I have to sort out my finances. And even for me, who I thought was pretty financially savvy, I thought it was quite tricky to figure out what to do with my money, how to invest. And so as the next company, I joined Plum, which is the saving app, where we tried to help people save. And we built this product to help them invest and to make it easier. And I started to realize that in Europe, I think kind of differently from in the US, investing is even more something that almost no one participates in. And if you start thinking about it, you have very few very good tools for. And so when RobinHood reached out to me and said, go launch us in Europe, I thought that's a unique opportunity
Perfect.
to bring one of the most powerful services from the US to European customers. So spent 2 years there. We ended up not launching the product in Europe because the company decided to refocus on the US. But I got my mindset on this problem that the barriers to investing in Europe are much too high. And so when Mika and Martin, my old colleagues, started building LightYear, I tried to help them where I could. I invested in their seed round. And when, after having a kid, I was ready for the next place to jump in fully, I decided to join them. And so what LightYear does is it uses kind of the expertise from the team on removing borders between countries when it comes to money with the experience we have in investing. And our objective is to take kind of these exceptional experiences you can actually get in the US if you want to invest in the US market and bring that to European investors, but then for the global stock market. So make it incredibly easy for someone to invest in stocks, to hold money in multi-currency wallets so that they don't have to incur a lot of fees. We have a model where we want to make sure we don't charge trading commissions or anything like that. We make it very low cost for someone to invest in the stocks that are local to them and make it cost effective to invest in stocks from across the world and really bring access to normal European consumers. And it's been going well so far. We're at the early stages of building this business. So we launched a year ago in the UK. We launched in 19 European markets 2 months ago. And we're still building the core of the product and shipping pretty fundamental features every few months. But it's been really a fun ride so far, but long way to go.
Right. Wow. Well, so that's a crazy experience and background on multiple continents and all kinds of different fintech apps. And it sounds like if Robinhood was thinking of launching in Europe and they didn't, there's an obvious gap there, right? Like that this is a serious problem that you face in Europe if you want to invest in Europe, is there isn't an easy tool to do it. If you're following along at home, you can go to golightyear.com to check out the app and the website. Can you just talk a little bit about the experience that you're creating or you already created? Like when I come to your website, I download the app. Is it the same as using Robinhood in the United States? Is it different? What kind of experience are you trying to create for your users?
Yeah, I think so. We try and make the experience of getting started with investing as friction free as possible. So And therefore, it means that in every country in Europe, you probably have slightly different experience. So, for example, the UK versus in Europe, we have different payment methods. And so when you join, you sign up, we try and make it as smooth as possible for you to get introduced. And so to onboard, right? Like any other fintech app, we have to comply with a bunch of regulations when it comes to KYCing our customers and making sure we know who they are and making sure they understand the product. And so we go through that through a mobile experience as easy as we can make it. We put a lot of emphasis on making sure that funding is very easy and low cost to the customer. So we offer funding through bank transfer or through card, so that you can easily get started. And then we let you access both. So in Europe, we let you access both European and US markets. So actually the trading window within which you can make your first trade is quite high. So you can get started, or quite long. So you can get started quite easily. So we try to make that friction free, and also super importantly, we try to make sure that the core investing experience is incredibly cost effective. And for example, for Europeans investing in European stocks, it's free. So your basic stock investing in the markets that are most relevant to you, you wouldn't pay any FX fee or trading commissions.
Right. And your role, it sounds like, is very focused on the compliance, the back end, the regulation, all the things that go into making that experience seamless and legal. Can you talk a little bit about the challenges of doing that in Europe versus the United States? Like I've got to imagine having the European Union helps a little bit, but you've got dozens of countries, whereas in the US you just have one. What kind of challenges are you solving on the back end to make that happen?
Yeah, so you're really right. I think there are a few things. I think also the standard that regulators expect from companies ourselves, I think is going up all the time as they get more familiar with investment firms and as they see also the kind of risks that there are when a lot of retail investors invest. And so I think the standard we hold ourselves to is very high. And then within Europe, luckily we have the European Union, and that a lot of the financial regulation is standardized across it. And so for us, we really have to think about having two products that are subject to different requirements in the UK and in Europe. So broad strokes, the experiences can be the same across the 19 European countries that we operate in. But then, of course, every country has a set of local requirements that we need to meet sometimes. Of course, there's also complexity just from the customer point of view, right? Customers they have different cultural context, they have different languages. So we need to make sure that we build a product that's also understandable for customers so that they can start using the product, that they convert, that they understand it, that they can get high quality support, things like that.
Is the access to the data that your customers need to make investment decisions, is it easy to get in Europe? I'm very familiar with like financial data in the United States and some of the challenges that we have with, getting stock price data or fundamental data, things like that. What is that ecosystem like in Europe?
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I think when you think about like global equity markets, I don't know the exact figure, but I think more than the majority of like all the stock market volume in the world happens on US markets. And US markets, the whole infrastructure is quite standardized, centralized, right? So there's one set of like NBBO, there's one central clearing depository, there's one custodian, which means that actually a lot of things, once you have access to it for a stock, you have access to it for almost every other stock. And in Europe, that works differently. So through LightYear, we provide access to now 4 primary markets, stocks that trade on a few other markets as well. And it means that we have, for example, like multiple custody relationships. So we have multiple places where the assets are held for customers. And all of them, they have their own onboarding and their own quirks. From a data point of view, yes, it depends on the exchanges where the instruments trade. That's where generally the data comes from. So if you have multiple exchanges, you also have multiple places from which you have to get data. And so all those problems that for the US are kind of one, for Europe, they end up being, either a few partnerships or a few memberships. And you have to figure out how you navigate that ecosystem so that you can still offer a local product to customers, but you also give them broad access.
Is that why nobody's done this before, do you think? Or is that just one of the reasons why, LightYear is kind of pioneering this European investment space? I would imagine there's other reasons too, but I got to imagine the complexity of it is part of the problem.
I think it's something that we tried to do well. So like managing the complexity and still providing a very simple experience. So this idea that and I think this is something that comes a bit from the WISE ethos too. Like you can have a very, very complex product in the backend that looks very seamless for customers. And at LightYear, that's what we try to do with our operation and the way in which we abstract away from global markets. So both on currency itself, so converting in and out and having it in different wallets, and the markets, right? Access to many different markets and venues is actually quite complex, but the user doesn't care about that. The user cares about the fact that they can put money in and they can invest in whatever equity they want without really thinking about like how it works in the back end, and they can trust that LightYear solves all the problems in the meantime. And that's what we try to do, right? So I think fundamentally we think about the business needing to do two things super well, which is provide like friction-free access to all these different things that exist in the world, and then explain that to customers in a way that they can make good decisions that end up benefiting them in the long run. And we're really focused on that first block now. Yeah, which is hard. If we look at our competitors, largely they stay focused on one market and one or two sets of instruments. And few of them have expanded to the countries that we have, or even the asset coverage that we have.
Yeah, they've kept it pretty limited. What has been the result for European investors? I mean, you talked about how they aren't participating at the same rates. Like if they weren't using something like LightYear, what were they doing? Just leaving it in a retirement account or not investing in individual stocks? Like what were the solutions in the past? Like and how did that impact individual investors?
I think what we see here is there are two things that are different from the US that are material. One is that the products aren't as good yet. So this whole revolution that you've heard in equity trading in the US, where now anyone or a lot of people from our generation find it very easy to invest. I think that hasn't really happened yet here. There are some brokers, but hasn't really had the quality of product that you've had in the US. And secondly, there is also still a much bigger cultural barrier to investing,
Mm,
in where the markets aren't part of culture in the way that they are in the US.
mm.
And they aren't as much part. It's not something that you discuss on the dinner table. You don't go to a pub and brag about the fact that you made this like great investment.
Right.
The culture is like a little bit more timid around that. So the consequence of that for users so far is I think you have this subset of very experienced investors who use the existing tools, and they pay significant fees on foreign exchange because you got to invest in the US market, even if you're European, because it's most of the equities in the world. Like most of the interesting companies, most of the growth has come from there. So you get rinsed on fees, or you have
Mm,
pretty limited products. But for the majority, it means that you never get to equities. And I think you also don't learn about markets. So I think there are some passive products available, but they also don't receive mainstream adoption because I think the more active investing products are also those places where you learn about markets, so that you build a trust in markets, so that you then invest continuously on an ongoing basis into things like a long-term pension fund or robo or something like that.
I've always thought that those conversations and like having that part of your culture does lead to more financial literacy. Is that part of your vision for Lightyear that, over because you exist in that market and you're going to be an option that's easy to use and handles the complexity for users in European markets, that it's culturally relevant in all those different parts of Europe. Do you think that that's going to lead to a bit of a change for the better in terms of financial literacy, investing, understanding the markets, and being able to participate?
That's our North Star. So I think right now we've been focused as a company a lot on like building this foundation, which is the access to markets. And that means our product is really good for people who already know how to invest because it's just better, it's seamless, it's cheaper. But it doesn't yet reach like the masses, the mass amount of people that aren't investing yet. And I think for there we have to get better over time at explaining investing at its most fundamental level, in providing like journeys and experiences for new investors that get them comfortable with market, get them confident in their decisions, so that they end up being good long-term investors. But that's why we're here. I think
Yeah.
making investing a little bit cheaper for experienced investors is not that interesting of a challenge versus solving this problem much more broadly.
Yeah, it's about it. I hate to use the word democratizing, but it is kind of like spreading and democratizing access to the tools that folks need to be literate in participating and involved and benefiting from investing. And it sounds like a lot of it comes down to the user experience. Like if you want to help a very sophisticated trader get a little bit better and save a little bit on their fees, the experience doesn't have to be perfect because they're already a very sophisticated investor. So can you talk a little bit about the user experience, like what you're building to actually make it so easy and so seamless that anybody can do it? Like what types of features, what types of information are you putting into onto the platform?
Yeah, let me talk to you about like what we currently have and then what I think where we need to get to. So currently our focus is on providing good data. So giving you a lot of information. It's like maybe if we break the problem down, it's about like discovering a stock, and then once you have a stock, you need to make a decision on whether you want to buy it or not. So an area where we're already incredibly strong is providing high quality information on the equities we have available. So we have news, we have a lot of different like comparable metrics that you can look at for stocks. We have like information on earnings. We will build more features to help you engage with the stock when it comes to voting and when it comes to like listening to earnings calls. And so I think we're pretty good already. And once you've identified the stock and you want to figure out whether you want to buy it, to help you do that. The question before that, that's harder problem, I think, is stock discovery and portfolio creation. So figuring out what are the stocks that I should look at and figure out whether I should buy them or not. What's a harder problem is kind of portfolio constructing and figuring out, like helping a user make a decision on what are the type of equity they want to buy. And then stock discovery, figuring out where should I even look. And I think there, currently, we try and do that by creating groups of stocks that are similar so that you don't have to think about what stock do I want to buy, but you can think, okay, I want to buy a European ETF. Okay, then I go to one list. So we try and make sense of the universe of like 3,000 equities we have available, and we break that down into chunks that are slightly more easy to understand. But I think here we can do a much better job. So to give you an example, we launched in Europe and my dad signed up. And my dad is an example of many users who thought it was super easy to sign up, funded his account, didn't do anything, called me like, Wander, I'm in the app, but what do I do now? And
Oh,
I think a lot of people feel that because there's a lot of hurdles between you and actually investing, and a lot of them they're overcome once you get yourself over the hurdle. And I think the learning journey often starts when you make that first investment, once you've made that first pick, but it can be super intimidating. And we also still need to do a lot better for different types of investors who are going through different types of first investing experiences.
so like picking up a stock and researching a stock and then building a portfolio, like this is the kind of things that you have to learn how to do. And let's say you get all this right. What would that say your dad? He's not an investor, he's not active, but he learns and he becomes, and because the tools are easy, what's the vision for him, say 5 years from now? And he is successful using your tool, like what kind of, is he super savvy? Is he day trading? Is he a millionaire? Like where do you see him getting to because he used your app?
So I think for my dad, what are his problems with investing? So he invests, but he pays someone to make a decision what ETF to invest in, and he pays them 1%. That's probably not that valuable for him. Like I don't think my dad has the aspiration to to spend every day on our app, and I don't think our objective is that everyone does that. I think for my dad, I think it's an element of learning and seeing if he finds it interesting to invest also slightly more actively. But I think it's more about realizing that the service that is provided to him for 1% a year is actually not that hard. Right, the ETFs that he gets allocated, they're like pretty standard set of ETFs that I think he could pick himself in any app. But he lacks the confidence to do that. And I think LightYear should make it easy to help you understand one, okay, what's happening, then give you the tools to invest and try it yourself. And then when you have some good understanding, make the decision about whether you want to pay someone to invest for you or whether you want to do it yourself. Or perhaps like in the long term, we should also offer you the ability to have a more automated experience, but still at lower fees, right? My dad should be paying 1%
Right.
to
Yeah.
handle his money.
I think that's a good vision. Like you don't want to make everybody into an active day trader who's buying huge
They're not.
amounts of options contracts, right? But they can make decisions for themselves, have fewer fees, and take an active role in in what they're buying.
Yeah, and to build on that, so our product is like just simple equities, simple ETFs. We think those are the right products for most people. We don't have plans to go beyond that at this point.
Is that on purpose, or is that just because you haven't met the regulatory challenges yet? Or do you actually, is that kind of your goal, is to limit it to not making people pick active stocks like a hedge fund would.
We want people to pick stocks, but I do think we want to make sure that the product that we create for users like ends up doing good by them, ends up with them benefiting from the experience, right? We want to build a wealth product. We don't want to build a product that's entertainment. And so the average user, when they come in, they should benefit from using LightYear, because in the end,
Mm.
that's our objective, is to help people benefit from global growth, right? Which is, in a sense, is indirectly what you do when you benefit in the stock market. Some financial products achieve that better than others. I think in the UK, we don't have options much, but we have product classes like CFDs. And I think it's very hard to offer a CFD product to customers in a way that leads to good outcomes for them. And I think for us, maybe we figure out a way, but right now it's hard for me to see how we would do that in a way that's good for customers.
Right. Like I think we in the United States, I'm sure in Europe too, like over COVID, we saw a lot more retail investors getting onto places like Reddit and forums and Wall Street Bets and buy, doing the kinds of things that you would expect a risky hedge fund to do, like buying options on meme stocks and things like that. It sounds like, you want your investors to be capable, your users to be capable of doing that, but then this is how I invest. Like it's mostly ETFs. It's like choosing something diversified, something that's got
Yeah.
allows you to participate, but is kind of realistic about the amount of risk that an individual investor should be taking.
Like, yeah, we don't want to tell people what they should be doing, right? We're still a platform that's about providing access to a broad range of equities, but the average customer needs to benefit from the access.
Yeah.
I think that would be very clear in any product decision that we make.
Well, you're a chief operating officer. That's my role as well. Can you tell me a little bit more about the back end of this? Like, you just kind of touched on it in broad strokes, like about how complicated it is. But like on a day to day, what kinds of challenges go into making this actually happen? Like, you talked about the different regional data types and the compliance of different regions, but like, as you expand the platform, like what can you give me an example of something that you would work on that would make all of this possible?
I think about our business and kind of, or the things I work on fit in these three domains. So one is compliance. I think we touched on that a bit already, which is making sure we're regulated in the right way. And we understand the constraints within which we should be building software and which we should be building process. And that's a lot about just diligently understanding what the requirements are, making sure we have good open relationships with regulators, and then that internally everyone understands the rules and builds a culture about like doing what's right for customers. Actually, often the things that are right for customers and the things that regulators want aren't that misaligned generally in Europe. The second block is we need to serve customers exceptionally well. And serving customers exceptionally well gets harder whenever we add something to the product, because our product gets more complex. That means it's harder to understand for a customer support agent. It means there are more things that can go wrong. And so we have compliance operations teams, customer operations teams, and brokerage operations teams that manage a kind of new users, the questions from users, and then the brokerage operation. So making sure that money flows in the way it should. And then the third thing, which I think is a lot what people that you talk to will be about, fintech is also stitching together other bits of financial infrastructure in an elegant way, right? Almost no one builds everything from scratch, and neither do we. And so a lot of my job, if we do something new, is to figure out what are the partners that can support this to provide the best service to customers at the lowest cost. And so we work with clearing brokers, we work with venues, we work with data providers, so endless amounts of partners to make the service possible. So I think I get like a typical project for me. So we're still at the exciting stage where we're just launching a lot of pretty big products. So the last thing we worked on was launching 19 European countries and making our product accessible from 19 European countries. And so there my role was really coordinating the many things that come together if you want to execute a product launch in a new market, from making sure that we had everything, the requirements were clear from a regulatory point of view, from an operational point of view, that we were appropriately testing the product before it went out, that our teams were set up for all the new types of customers and new types of problems, and that we then like did the rollout in a stable way that made sure that we could provide a really good customer experience throughout.
Is there a big apparatus to supporting those customers from a human capital standpoint of like a new customer comes onto the platform and they sign up like you're talking about your dad and funds his account and then he's like, all right, now I have questions. Now I don't know what to do. Is there a lot of support from a, ticketing or a human on the back end
Yeah.
that can help get them past that hurdle?
So we want to build a product that is friction-free and cheap, and I think both, or low cost, and both of those
Mm-hmm.
mean that there cannot be many humans involved in serving a customer. And so we need to make sure that, and not that support is not accessible, it should be accessible, but it should be unnecessary. And it should be there
Mm-hmm.
for the cases where the product really doesn't suit, or like there's something going wrong that we did not expect. And so for
Mm-hmm.
us, we try and build products. So on the onboarding side, we use verification providers that are automatic. So ideally the customer doesn't notice, but sometimes the customer notices because they have to upload a document, but automatically they get approved in most cases. So that the support load for supporting onboarding should be very low. And same as with the product. The product should be self-explanatory. You shouldn't need to ask a question to support in most cases. And so the places where things scale with the amount of users, we put a lot of energy into making sure those use cases are automated. There are some things that we don't automate in the early days because we realize we also learn as an organization about how a process should work, or how like in reality this interaction with a partner might work. And so sometimes there's a benefit to doing it manually for a little bit so that you can understand and learn and then automate later. But yeah,
Mm-hmm.
anything that scales, we try to avoid it.
And do you collect a lot of feedback from the users as they're testing out? And does that help drive your product cycle of like what kinds of things are they asking for?
So we launch most products with some type of waitlist or beta group. So those people we talk to, like my dad is an example, but we talked to 60 people, I think, in Europe before we launched to make sure that people from different contexts understood it. In the UK, people ask for ISAs and local stocks. And local stocks, luckily, we'll deliver to them very soon. ISAs, hopefully they also come pretty soon. But that's what they ask for, like tax wrappers and relevant stocks. In Europe, it really depends per country what people find important.
By
But
local stocks, are local stocks like things that companies that are based in my area?
the brands that are most relevant to me, right? So like
Mm,
Tesco is an example. I buy my groceries not at Walmart, but at Tesco. So I want to buy Tesco stock. I think for a lot of
okay.
people, that's kind of the starting point of their investing journey is they pick a brand that they like and they know, and they're like, okay, this is a good company. I want to buy it. So we
Yeah.
get that request a lot. Yeah. And then it's about like tax wrappers, but we collect data in a lot of ways. So we have surveys running automatically to almost all users that have open text fields. We have amazing user researcher who spends all her time trying to understand specific problems and then interviewing a lot of our users for it. We do a lot of like research before we build a product for like target customers, trying to understand if we're building the right thing. I think it's really important because we have very little, like we're a small company still. We don't have that many resources. We want to make sure we spend them in the right place.
Right. And so that's all about user research, which is the first part of the kind of a UX, UI, user experience ethos. I'm of the opinion that any fintech platform that's going to win in a competitive landscape has to be really focused on the user experience. And you've got this incredibly complicated back end. It takes all this work to make a simple front end, to make that user experience simple. Can you just talk a little bit about in general, like if that is an ethos that LightYear has about user experience, is that something that's going to keep driving you in the coming years, or is there a way to compete without it?
So the user experience is super important, I think, especially in financial services, especially in investing. Because in your investing journey, like for a lot of people, their first investment is pretty scary because there's a lot of like new things you're doing. And I think especially when something is kind of scary and nerve wracking, any reason you have to stop doing it and to procrastinate and to leave, you will take it. And so
Mm,
often those are like things in the product that are even just a little bit jarring or a little bit confusing, or like the moment my dad had where he landed in the app and then he didn't know what to do next. And so this is where designing a product that deeply understands how users are used to using products, and then making sure that we do the research also on those experiences. So yeah, right now I think today we're launching a new product. We're testing all the flows with some customers. Yeah, so making sure that there's nothing there that causes friction or causes concern is really important. Making sure there's nothing that causes like reduction in trust. Like we're an investment platform. We want to be here in 50 years. We want to have help you with your wealth, but we want to be a material part of your financial life. That means you really need to trust us. And
mm.
trust also means that nothing is confusing or jarring. That it's not that you get a dividend and you expected it the day before. That's a bad experience. We need to make sure that we help you understand investing and make sure that you never get confused. You never, uh, feel that we're doing something you did not expect.
I want to leave it with hearing a little bit about your users who are being successful. I can see on your website all these reviews, and people are saying things like, "This was the easiest thing to use. This was the best investing app that I could find. Like I've tried a bunch. This one works better than all the other ones." Are you getting success stories from users that already that are using the tool and being able to invest in a way they couldn't before?
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Like we have a pretty active community on Facebook where we put like our first 500 users in. They're giving us constructive feedback, but they're also sharing their success and how empowering it was. It's always great to read the reviews, right? Both the internal and
Mm,
the ones that are on Trustpilot of people who make
yeah.
their first investment, or they realize that investing is something they can do, or they just found a better broker where before they were paying £8 and now they pay no commissions. So that's super exciting. It's super exciting. Of course, it's early days and we have quite far to go, but every time, like personally for me, I find it the most exciting when I'm actually in a user research interview with someone who's been using the product for a while, and they talk about it like it's something that's now relevant in their financial life, that's now relevant in their life. And it's very cool when you've built a product or contributed to building something that people think is this like institution that's really important and they trust it. And that's what we need to be building more of, right? We need to
Yeah.
help people that really think we're an important part of their financial life, because that's when we can help them the most.
I love it. Well, it was amazing hearing about it. If you're at home and you want to learn more, go to golightyear.com. Wander is just an amazing app and an amazing market that you're opening up for these kinds of tools. Thanks for coming on the show.
It was a pleasure. Have a wonderful day.
You too.